If you end up listening to a Mötley Crüe record in the afterlife, there's a chance that Mick Mars will still be riffing through the speakers. He once joked, "Tommy would dig me up and use my bones for drumsticks." It was dry, dark humor, but there is a hidden truth behind every joke. Behind this one was Mick's exhaustion he couldn't express otherwise. Now at 73, Mick Mars has exposed one of rock's most toxic breakups. His allegations against Mötley Crüe aren't just shocking. They're a revealing look into decades of backstage tension, legal issues, and personal betrayal. So what exactly happened? Let's take a deep dive into the untold story behind Mars and the band he helped build. The quiet architect of chaos, born Robert Allen Deal in Terre Haute, Indiana in 1951, Mick Mars was raised in a working-class family that struggled to make ends meet. Robert, more famously known as Mick, found his true passion at 12 when his parents gifted him a guitar. By the time he hit his teens, he was chasing music, bouncing between California bands with names you can't possibly have heard of. This was because they all failed, over and over again. But those failures built a base for his undying determination. When Mötley Crüe came together in 1981, it was Mars who made their sound better. Nikki Sixx shaped the band's vision, and Tommy Lee fueled its energy. But Mars? He brought a deep, dirty, and truly unique sound. He even coined the name Mötley Crüe when a bandmate described them as a motley-looking crew. It stuck, like the man himself. Different from the start, Mars was different. From day one, he stood apart, while the rest of Crüe leaned hard into the dark side of fame, as in booze, drugs, arrests, and drama. Mars stayed focused on tone, timing, and technique. He wasn't chasing trends. He was building riffs that would become the most important part of stadium anthems like Dr. Feelgood and Kickstart My Heart. His work ethic became legendary. Elektra Records engineers recall that Mars was always the first in the studio and the last to leave. He came armed with notebooks full of solos, and when the red light blinked on, it was always him. No stand-ins, no studio tricks. Even during press tours, he had his guitar with him, quietly experimenting backstage. Another thing that set him apart was his experience with pain and illness at a young age. At 17, he was diagnosed with ankylosing spondylitis, a rare spinal condition that slowly fuses vertebrae. The disease twisted his posture, and he had to bear with daily agony. In 2004, he had spinal fusion surgery and metal rods implanted just to stand upright. Still, he played. For over 4 decades, Mars never missed a tour, an album, or a rehearsal. He outlasted all types of things like health scares and drug overdoses, which he never did. He watched the rise and fall of glam metal. And while fans screamed for Lee's drum solos or Sixx's on-stage behavior, it was Mars who quietly kept the machine running. The departure that changed everything. On October 26, 2022, Mick Mars finally stepped back. In a public statement, he announced he could no longer keep up with Mötley Crüe's difficult tour schedule due to his worsening condition. But he made one thing clear: he was not leaving the band. He was simply bowing out of live performances. He clarified that he was not walking away from his role, his legacy, or his financial share. The response from the band was vague. A press release confirmed Mars wouldn't tour, and that guitarist John Five would be stepping in. However, it made no mention of whether Mars was still a member. Something about the phrasing that Mars had fulfilled his mission felt off. Fans began to speculate. Then came the final move that confirmed the fear of fans worldwide. His image was scrubbed from tour promos and posters. It was as if he had never existed. People saw this as betrayal or as heartbreak. But for Mars, it was just the beginning. Behind the curtain, John Five was a veteran guitarist known to have played with the likes of Marilyn Manson and Rob Zombie. It was clear he was no stranger to the band since he was already close to Nikki Sixx and Tommy Lee. There were rumors that his joining the band had been planned long before Mars announced he wouldn't be going on any more tours. Outlets like Ultimate Classic Rock suggested that the replacement felt more like an ousting. Mars, who was always known as the quiet one, didn't react, at least not in public. But behind the scenes, he started making moves. Sources later confirmed he'd been in contact with legal teams as early as January 2023, allegedly looking for clarity on his stake in the band. It turned out that Mars had long been cut out of key meetings. He avoided drama and had never involved himself deeply in the band's finances. Over time, this distance translated into diminished voting power, even though he still legally owned 25% of the Mötley Crüe brand. The lawsuit. On April 6, 2023, Mick Mars broke his silence. He filed a lawsuit in Los Angeles Superior Court, accusing his bandmates of attempting to force him out and strip him of earnings. The most damning claim was that his 25% profit share had been reduced to just 5% without his consent. Mars also revealed something darker. Before being eased out, he said he was forced to take humiliating performance tests to prove he could still play live. No one else had to. And despite his physical limitations, he said he was the only one performing completely live, while others leaned heavily on pre-recorded tracks. He claimed that Tommy Lee was using drum loops and that Vince Neil was lip-syncing. Mötley Crüe did not take that nicely. They hit back, and it wasn't pretty. Their lawyer claimed Mars had become unreliable, forgetting chords and slowing down rehearsals. Nikki Sixx said replacing him was a matter of professionalism, not personal vendetta. But the public didn't buy it entirely. Many fans, especially those on metal forums and in old-school rock circles, sided with Mars. To them, he was the soul of Mötley Crüe. Without him, the band felt hollow, more like a tribute act to itself than a living, breathing unit. A fight over legacy beyond royalties. The lawsuit raised a very important question: who exactly owns Mötley Crüe? Mars argued that as a founding member, he retained partial control over the name and its use. Any decision to continue touring under the banner of Mötley Crüe without his vote was a breach of their founding partnership in his eyes. His legal team even considered blocking the band from using the name unless new terms were agreed upon. The lawsuit wasn't just a contract dispute. It was a full-blown war over identity and legacy. As of mid-2024, no final judgment had been made, but the damage to the band's image was done. Meanwhile, Mars moved forward. The other side of Mars. In February 2024, Mick Mars released his long-awaited solo debut, The Other Side of Mars. Unlike anything he'd done with Mötley Crüe, the album leaned into industrial, grunge, and alt-metal textures. It was raw, angry, personal. The album was produced by Michael Wagoner, who had worked with legends like Metallica and Ozzy Osbourne. It featured a powerhouse lineup: Korn's Ray Luzier on drums, Alice Cooper's Paul Taylor on keyboards, and Jacob Bunton on vocals. Mars didn't just play the guitar, he poured his soul into every note. The lead single, Loyal to the Lie, hit hard. When asked by Guitar World about the song's message, Mars replied simply, "I don't need to write a statement, I just let the guitar do the talking." The public listened. The album climbed to number 1, 5 on iTunes Rock and Number, 18 on the Billboard Top Rock Albums chart, which was powered almost entirely by physical sales. Mars' fanbase hadn't abandoned him. They were waiting, not done yet. Though touring was still off the table, Mars had no intention of slowing down. He announced a remix edition of The Other Side of Mars, a behind-the-scenes documentary. But the thing everyone actually got excited for was a second solo album set for late 2025. He teased a more electronic sound and hinted at a collaboration with a female alt-rock vocalist. In a conversation with Metal Edge, Mars made his priorities crystal clear. "I don't need the stage, I need the studio. That's where I truly live." By now, the reinvention was complete. Mick Mars wasn't just the guy from Mötley Crüe anymore. He was a standalone artist, unfiltered and unleashed. The final word. In June 2024, Rolling Stone ran a cover story on Mars. The piece showed the pain he was put through. "I was drained like a broken machine and then thrown away," Mars said. "That's not how brothers treat each other." Still, he refused to stay bitter. When Mick was asked if he'd ever consider reuniting with the band, he gave an honest answer: "If we play again, it has to be for the music, not for money, not for nostalgia." Today, Mick Mars lives in Nashville, doing physical therapy and recording new tracks in his home studio. He's not on tour, not on posters, and not in band meetings, but he's more visible than ever. Rock podcasts analyze his riffs. Fans wear his solo album shirts to festivals. Young guitarists name him as an influence. What's most unexpected and impressive is how music critics are now lobbying for his solo addition into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, not just as a member of Mötley Crüe, but as a rock legend in his own right. In a late 2024 interview with Metal Hammer, Mars summed up his journey in a sentence: "I didn't speak to win. I spoke to stay true to myself." He may no longer stand in the spotlight, but at 73, Mick Mars is still very much here, and this time, he's telling his story, one riff at a time. In a world that often chews up artists and spits them out, Mick Mars didn't just survive, he adapted, evolved, and kept creating. While the band he helped build continues without him, he's no longer chasing acceptance or stage lights. He has something far more valuable now: freedom. Freedom to play what he wants, to say what he never could, and to be remembered not just as the man behind Mötley Crüe's heaviest riffs, but as an artist who dealt with pain quietly, fought back loudly, and never stopped speaking through his guitar. The industry may have tried to write his final chapter, but Mick Mars picked up the pen, and he's still writing.